All right, we are going live. We're just getting set up. Bear with us. We'll start at 7 o'clock. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them down in the chat below.
How are you? Long time no see. 25 years or more. That's right. And so I brought this. Oh yeah. I have my comments.
Oops. All right, we're just getting Wi-Fi set up. Thank you all for joining. If you have questions, drop them below. I'm gonna go mute until we start. We've got about 9 minutes, so get cozy.
Read all of
All right, I'm going to unmute. Thank you all for joining. This is the Fireside chat for the Mann Gulch Fire. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them below. Make sure to invite your friends. We've got a full house here tonight, so drop your questions below.
You're good. Yeah. Think yourself. Good? I think we're good.
We were supposed to leave a week ago.
Hello, everyone. Still got people coming in.
Here, I'll give you a little
Thank you
tour.
all for coming out on this snowy, cold night. We're really happy to have you. Welcome to our third Fireside chat. So we're really excited to be hosting these. Some of you may have come for one of our other ones, but they've been very popular, so we are going to continue to do that. We do have some snacks and drinks in the back, so feel free to enjoy those. There's also a sign-up sheet back there, so if you haven't signed in, we'd appreciate that. That would be great. My name is Sherry Barron. I'm the stewardship manager with Prickly Pear Land Trust, and I'm excited to introduce our guest speakers tonight. So we have two folks here, Liz Burke, who's the Conservation Education Specialist with the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest, and David Turner, who's a retired forester who worked for most of his career with the Helena District of the Forest Service. And I think they have put together a really great presentation. And in honor of the 75th, right, the 75th commemoration of the Mann Gulch Fire, I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you. What a group. I do think you're going to need to start running out the Myrtle Loy and then the Civic Center. Yeah, so keep it up. I am so pleased to be here tonight with my friend David Turner. We appreciate this opportunity to be part of the Prickly Pear Land Trust Fireside Chats. And I just want you to know that as a member of the Mann Gulch 75th Planning Committee, it has just been a pleasure to work with many of you in the audience and to see some of the things that will be happening this year. After David's talk, I will round this out with a sneak peek of what you might expect in the month of August when we have our memorial tribute for the 75th anniversary of the event up in Mann Gulch. But already we have so much going on in our education community. Tonight is a great example. And we just really welcome each and every one of you to really take full advantage of this opportunity to connect with something that's important and really is part of our Montana heritage. I would also like to say that just from this outpouring of interest that I'm seeing here today and also streaming online, that this really strikes a deep chord within us now as much as it did 7 decades ago. And listening to David's words as I've worked with him over this last year really brings me back to the days of early smoke jumping, 1949, the view that we had of wildfire fighting during that time, and really how we thought about fire on the land in the middle of the 20th century. Since then, we've learned so much as an agency, as a firefighting organization, and as a community. And tonight, I invite you to fully engage in the power of David's words and to learn a little bit more about the Mann Gulch Fire. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I've been asked to provide a little background on myself, so I'll start with that. I landed in Helena in 1973, midsummer, as a volunteer in Service to America, VISTA volunteer, federal domestic program similar to the Peace Corps. It was in 1973. The following year, 1974, my wife and I opened Aunt Bonnie's bookstore, first in Reader's Alley, and then eventually moving it downtown to Last Chance Gulch, where it resides today. With the business established, I took a summer job on the Old Canyon Prairie Ranger District on the Helena National Forest, taking care of a campground and picnic area on the Missouri River north of Helena in the gates of the mountains. After several seasons working as a temporary employee, I was hired full-time to chase miners, mining companies, and oil and gas companies working on the Ranger District. As the years passed, I also managed campgrounds, trails, and wilderness on the Ranger District. In 1992, with the release of Norman McLean's bestseller, Young Men and Fire, and the growing public interest in the Mann Gulch Fire, I was chosen as the point man for the force to respond to inquiries about the incident. In order to respond to these requests, I spent considerable time researching Forest Service files and other publications in an attempt to understand what had taken place and separate fact from fiction about the fire. About this same time, the Ranger District began to receive requests from various groups, mostly Forest Service firefighting crews, to be guided into the Gulch to see and hear the story of what took place there in 1949. Later, as popularity of Young Men and Fire continued to grow, requests to be guided into the Gulch from firefighters, schools, universities, and colleges, military groups, and fire management teams increased with each summer season. I answered each of these requests, and over the years I've guided hundreds of people into the Gulch and told the story of this tragic fire to my fellow hikers. In 1999, the 50th anniversary of the fire, I headed the Forest Service group charged with planning and executing the commemorative activities in Helena. For my interpretive efforts over the years, I was awarded the Northern Region of the Forest Service Interpreter of the Year for 1999. I retired from the Forest Service in 2002, but I've continued to receive requests to guide individuals and groups into Mann Gulch and to provide in-class presentations similar to this evening's gathering. The 13th fire. The men on the Canyon Ferry Ranger District fought more than 57 wildfires during the summer of 1949. And only one of these fires, the 13th of the season, as luck would have it, would become seared into the collective memory of the Forest Service and wildland firefighters everywhere. That fire was the Mann Gulch Fire. Probably like most infamous wildfires, the Mann Gulch Fire started out routinely enough. A summer thunderstorm passed over Helena Valley, and into the Big Gulch Mountains on the afternoon of August 4th. Like many storms in August in Montana, lightning from this storm rained down on the mountainous landscape. Even before darkness had set in, reports of fires started by that storm began pouring into the Helena Forest offices. But burning high up on a rocky ridge in the remote gates of the mountain's wild area north of Helena, the Mann Gulch Fire wasn't spotted until just before noon the following day, August 5th. The fire lookout 30 miles away spotted the first wisp of smoke curling up off the rocky ridge. By the time District Ranger Bob Jansen had flown over the fire at 12:30 p.m., the fire had already grown to 6 acres in size. Because most of the local firefighters were already busy battling 2 other local fires, and the challenge of firefighting on a mountainous terrain in the gates of the wild area, the call went out for smoke jumpers from the jump base in Missoula. In 1949, the practice of smoke jumping was only 10 years old. Beginning with a series of experiments in 1939, smoke jumping proved to be an effective, safe method of quickly delivering the best firefighters to fires burning in remote backcountry or in difficult terrain. Using aircraft and smoke jumpers, fire managers could attack these remote fires and keep them small. Keeping these fires small prevented millions of trees going up in flames, kept firefighting costs down, and made firefighting safer for everybody. So the jump plane was dispatched from Missoula with a 16-member smoke jumper crew and was over the fire by 3 p.m. The fire had already grown to 60 acres by then, but was still confined to burning on the ridge between Meriwether Canyon on the south and Mann Gulch to the north. By 3:10 p.m., when the temperature in the gulch had peaked at 97 degrees, the smoke jumpers parachuted into the head of Mann Gulch a half mile from the fire's edge. The jump was relatively uneventful until the parachute on the cargo pack containing the smoke jumper's only radio failed to open. The radio was destroyed, and the crew now had no means to communicate with the outside world. As soon as the jumpers landed and retrieved their tools, water, and rations from the cargo pack, crew foreman Robert Wagner Wag Dodge instructed the crew to grab a bite to eat before heading up to the fire. He himself headed up to the ridge line in the fire to see who was up there yelling. When he reached the fire, he discovered another firefighter and former smoke jumper, Jim Harrison, who was stationed at the nearby Meriwether picnic site, had hiked up to the fire and was already busily working trying to prevent the fire from burning up his picnic ground. But the fire at this point was starting to burn aggressively. Dodge and Jim Harrison hiked off the ridge to get back with the rest of the smoke jumpers whom they met coming up the slope to the fire. The smoke jumping crew and Jim Harrison, all under Dodge's command, regrouped and started to head down Mann Gulch for the safety of the nearby Missouri River. But before they could reach the Missouri, high winds materialized and the fire suddenly blew up. Whereas the fire up to this point had only been creeping along the ground, now it also leapt up into the trees and brush canopy and started to expand in every direction and grow at an incredible rate. In the process of blowing up, the fire tossed burning pine needles, pine cones, small branches, and other burning material up into the air. Some of these firebrands dropped into the thick grass on the north slope of Mann Gulch, below the line of men steadily heading for the river. The blink of an eye, the grass and brush was ignited, and stiff winds began to sweep the fire up the slope towards the smoke jumper crew. As Dodge, at the head of the line of men, crested a small finger ridge, he saw the fire was now rushing up the slope towards him and his men. He immediately realized their escape to the river was now cut off. Dodge quickly reversed the crew's direction of travel and headed the men back up the draw and uphill for the safety of the north ridge line. But the fire, too, was moving rapidly. Dodge realized his crew was still carrying all their tools and equipment, and that they were probably not moving fast enough to outrun the rapidly advancing fire. He ordered them to drop their heavy equipment, and the crew tossed down shovels, Pulaskis, crosscut saws, and 2 5-gallon water cans. Again, they turned uphill and began the steep climb out of the draw bottom. As the crew came out of the timber and into an open grassy area on the steep hillside, Dodge realized at this point that the fire was going to catch his crew before they could reach the ridge line. Without a word to anyone, Dodge bent down and set fire to the deep grass he was standing in, and within moments his fire quickly burned up the slope and burned off a 10-foot by 10-foot area of the grass. Dodge stepped into this burned area and shouted, "Up this way! Up this way!" But the men either didn't hear his instructions or they didn't understand what he wanted them to do, because they all bolted and ran for their lives. A few ran right up the slope to the ridge line. Most continued their escape paths across the hillside, but some also ran down the slope. The lethal fire, moving an estimated 600 to 700 feet per minute, quickly swept over the men, one by one, stopping Jim Harrison in his watch at 5:56 p.m. Wag Dodge survived without harm in his burned-off area. Two other smoke jumpers, Robert Sallee and Walt Rumsey, made it to the ridge line and sought safety in a rock slide on the north side of the ridge and also survived unharmed. The two other jumpers, Bill Hellman and Joe Sylvia, were caught by the wall of flames and they were badly burned, but they survived that initial burnover. After locating the injured men, Wag Dodge and Bob Sallee, without a radio to call for help, hiked down out of the still burning fire to go for medical assistance. Walt Rumsey was left with one of the injured smoke jumper, but the other jumper, Joe Sylvia, was left alone in the dark and smoky hell of Mann Gulch. Dodge and Sallee, after getting lost for a time, finally reached the fire camp at Merriweather at 8:50 p.m. and informed Ranger Bob Jansen they had 2 injured men and 11 men missing in Mann Gulch. Jansen immediately called on the radio for doctors and medical supplies and then organized a rescue party. It took several hours to round up the doctors and transport them from Helena and then into a boat headed down the Missouri. In their haste to get to the disaster scene, the physicians forgot their stretchers, and more time passed as the boat sped back upriver to retrieve the litters. But finally, at 11:30 p.m., the rescue party headed up the hill in what would become known as Rescue Gulch with the 2 injured smoke jumpers. Shortly after 2 a.m. on August 6th, Ranger Jansen, Wag Dodge, and the rescue crew with 2 doctors in tow finally reached Joe Sylvia, and the doctors began treating his burns. The party had reached Bill Hellman earlier and treated him before dropping over the ridge into Mann Gulch. When Sylvia had been treated and made as comfortable as circumstances would permit, the rescue party debated trying to move the men down to the Missouri out of Mann Gulch and Rescue Gulch. But the danger of the still burning fire, the heavy smoke, the darkness, and the steep slopes dictated they wait until first light. So at last, around 4:30 a.m., the rescue party started out of Mann Gulch and Rescue Gulch. When they reached the Missouri, boats whisked the men to ambulances standing by 7 miles upstream. From there, they were taken to the hospital in Helena. But both Hellman and Sylvia died from their burn injuries later that same afternoon. 450 men fought the fire for another 4 days, but it still burned uncontrolled, gobbling up nearly 5,000 acres of timber and grassland. And then later that same fall, on November 9th, 1949, a Forest Service fire researcher, Harry Gisborne, became Mann Gulch's 14th victim when he suffered a fatal heart attack in the gulch while conducting his research on the fire. The loss of 12 smoke jumpers and a former smoke jumper, James Harrison, in the Mann Gulch fire was a tragic blow to the Forest Service's 10-year-old smoke jumping program. The smoke jumpers had never lost a man to fire before Mann Gulch, and no fire since Mann Gulch has been nearly as devastating to their ranks. Following the fire, smoke jumper training was immediately modified to include much more emphasis on crew discipline and control. The events experienced in Mann Gulch fire also focused attention on the phenomena of fire blowups, and the need to understand and, most importantly, the ability to predict erratic fire behavior. The tragedy at Mann Gulch provided the needed impetus for the Forest Service to establish the science of fire behavior and spurred needed research into this little-understood area of fire suppression. The knowledge gained from this fire research continues to influence how wildfires are fought and managed with the goal of reducing the risk to firefighters. Likewise, fire number 13, the Mann Gulch fire, would prompt the Forest Service to establish 2 new centers, one in Montana and one in California, dedicated to developing and testing firefighting equipment. Over the years, these centers have provided an array of items designed to protect firefighters, including fire-resistant clothing, hard hats, and reflective metal-coated pup tents or fire shelters, which enable modern-day firefighters to survive burnovers similar to the one experienced in Mann Gulch. The legacy of this wildfire and the sacrifice these 13 men made in 1949 continues into the 21st century. This coming August 5th, we will once again gather to recognize these young men, their families, and all the men and women who each fire season dedicate themselves to protecting our public land. Thank you. Are there any questions from the group that I might take a stab at answering? I know it's a big crowd. There's one here.
Was Wade Dodge ever really cleared of any problems with that?
Yes, there was an investigation conducted September later that year in 1949. The men survivors and anybody who had a part in the fire were asked to make statements, written statements, and those were submitted to the gang of guys who did the investigation on the fire. And then they were called to Missoula to appear before the Board of Inquiry and give statements and answer questions from that board about the fire. And it was not a popular thing in as much as the public was not permitted to attend any of that, nor was the press. And after a week or so, after the last of the testimony, the Board of Review found that it was basically an act of God, and nobody associated with the fire was to blame. So, yes, he was cleared, as was everybody else, the district ranger and so on there. Yeah, but he did suffer. Wag did, he did. Yeah. There's a question here.
Is that practice of the escape fire that Dodge did, has that been employed since then? Is that a regular practice in a time of crisis?
Yes. The big deal with that is most smoke jumpers, almost all smoke jumping assignments, jump on forest fires. This was a grass fire, the fire that they really had to deal with. It's said that you can outwalk a forest fire under most conditions. 4 miles, 4 miles an hour, and you can be out of danger. On the other hand, much like this fire, under these conditions, slopes, temperature, how the fuels had dried out because of the weather pattern that particular summer in 1949. So, while there was generally accepted among all firefighters at that time, they were aware that the areas that had burned were the safest place to seek refuge if you really needed to, because the fuels are all burnt out. So that was known. It was not taught as a practice either to firefighters or to smoke jumpers. And again, it's because most of them jumped on forest fires, not grass fires. That answer that?
Yeah, is it something that they teach the smoke jumpers now? Not the backburn, but the escape fire itself.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the lessons that came out of this loss of 13 men. Yeah. There's a question back here.
Didn't Dodge get sued by the families of the other the other firefighters who died? They
Yeah.
were trying to blame him.
There were two attempts following the fire. The parents' surviving relatives brought two lawsuits against the Forest, not specifically against WAG, but against the Forest Service. But the statute of limitations ran out over the years. I think because the parents couldn't afford the attorney fees that it took to take on the federal government. So no, nobody was, no lawsuits were ever actually pursued, except superficially. But like I say, both of them were dismissed.
And then he died like 3 years later or something?
5 years later, Wag Dodge, he jumps the balance of that season of the 49 season. He does not jump the 1950 season and takes a job over in Superior for the Forest Service. And yes, 5 years later, when he's 38, he dies of Lou Gehrig's disease. Yeah. And of course, the theory that's popular is that the guilt that he carried from the fire led to exacerbated his disease. Yeah. Right here.
What's your take on McLean's account of the, the developments that occurred that day?
Yeah. I have used that as certainly part of my research. I guess what I took away from the book is that in let me think a minute, in the late 80s, 1980s, he took Walt Rumsey and Bob Sallee back up there and said, where did you get through the wall and go over to the other side? And they went like this, Walt said he found the juniper bush that he fell in once he got up over the ridgetop before they ran into the rock pile there and survived the fire. But the fact is, it was 41 years since they've been in Mann Gulch. And it had changed a great deal physically. In 1950, the 10th of August 1950, there was a cloud burst over in the head of the gulch, which basically sluiced everything down. And the story is that it pushed at the mouth of Mann Gulch where it meets the Missouri. It pushed that material 15 feet out into the river, and what was water became dry land. That's how much stuff came down. And then, of course, there was the Meriwether Fire in 2007, which burnt the gulch out one more time. But I think that the biggest thing is not recognizing the physical changes that occurred over 41 winters and summers of rainstorms and elk and deer roaming across the site. Yeah.
Are there any markers there?
Yes, there are. Each of the spots where the bodies were found, not necessarily where they died because of the slope. It's always been a given to me that running and then getting caught by that superheated air in front of the advancing flames, they would have hit the ground and could have rolled some distance down. In fact, they found later one of the smoke jumpers had a broken leg, and whether that was suffered during his attempt to escape or on the jump, nobody knows. Nobody really knows. But the smoke jumpers from Missoula the following year, 1950, came in and erected these concrete crosses on the spots where the bodies were recovered. And then in 1997, because of the deteriorating condition of those crosses, which were 50 years old by then, or almost 50 years old, the concrete was starting to fall off and And that'll be part of our work this summer to replace some of those crosses and make sure it's fitting for folks who will go in there and see that family, et cetera. Yes?
Did you have a slide? I've never been able to picture the notch or break where Rumsey and Sully survived getting up to. Did you have a picture of that?
No, because like I say, we don't know where that is.
Okay.
When McLean, when Norman took Sally and Rumsey in there in the late 80s and asked them, where did you go through the rocks? They went like this.
Okay.
And could never agree. In my mind, knowing what I know about, excuse me, about the site, there are, because of the steep slope, so what physicists call a high energy slope, there's a lot of movement of material and rocks, etc., over the ensuing years. So it doesn't look exactly today like it did in 1949. And if you go in there and you look up above where Dodge set his fire, there's a hole in that rim rock that's up there that you could drive a semi through. And that probably was not like that in 1949 when these guys were trying to escape the fire. Here's a question here.
Can you describe a good way to get up there? Because I've been reading a number of trail advice, and some suggest Meriwether, and some suggest Mann, and
Yep.
so coming in from the river.
Yes.
I'm not going to do the long.
Right. Your best bet is to get off at Meriwether
Okay.
and hike the trail up to the top. It's 27 switchbacks. You're going up an avalanche chute, but it's a walkable trail. It just takes time. From my own standpoint, excuse me, going up the bottom, getting off right at the mouth of the gulch and going up the trail that folks have feet into the landscape there. That's the shorter way. That's about a mile to a mile and a half going that way. If you go up Meriwether and around the head of the gulch and back over to the site, that's 3 miles in and 3 miles back out. But that, according to the preservation plan, and I didn't mention that site now is on the National Register of Historic Places. And so part of putting that plan together several years ago, it was decided that didn't want folks going up the bottom, and they wanted to get off of Meriwether and go up that trail. So does that answer your question? Was another one here? Yes.
Was Rescue Gulch substantially or totally burned?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it burned right up over the ridge.
Got it. Kept
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, burned onto what we call the game range now. That was the old Dana.
Got it.
Dana Range, Willow Creek. Yeah, that all burned out. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Liz?
One more.
Nope.
Is the book, The 13th Fire, for sale?
Not yet. It's actually not printed yet. But when it's printed, it will be for sale. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Question. So I hiked from Refrigerator Canyon up to the top to Bear Prairie. Am I getting this right?
Right?
So I was up at the top there, and it's a matchstick of it down. This was been 7 years ago, maybe now, maybe 5. I can't remember. But we were at the top, and we were looking to come down to Meriwether. And we just couldn't. Is it still like that up there, where it's just you can't? The trail is just covered by down.
Downfall, yeah.
Is that still like that? They haven't cleared that trail out down to Meriwether?
I do not know.
I might have an expert at the back of the room. Can I call my?
That trail is still there. It has a lot of dead down on it. That's in wilderness, so it's all cross cover. We have plans to get in there again this June.
You may say Kennedy Springs, but yeah, it's not.
No, I've done that.
Thank you. That was Mandy, my colleague in recreation. Appreciate it.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. So my portion of the talk is going to be telling you a little bit of things that are already happening and things you can kind of expect to see happening this August. So, go. Some big plans that the Forest Service has in partnership with many groups include, like David was saying, there are about 3 of the memorials that have degraded a bit. So there's going to be work with smoke jumpers and probably backcountry horsemen. We're going to be partnering, and those will be getting freshened up for the 75th Memorial Tribute. Over here on the top, where you see the interpretive sign, right there by the river, we're looking into an electronic kiosk that would actually be able to give you some information you could download on your mobile device without Wi-Fi. So things like that have been done on the Nez Perce Interpretive Trail, and there's things in the works to see if we can make that happen as well. As David mentioned, the 13th Fire is going to be printed and is going to be available, and we're very excited. We're working with the Montana Discovery Foundation, our friends group, and that should be upcoming. My friend Larissa at the back. I don't know if there are any more updates on that, other than that is a thing in the works.
It's being designed right now, so we should get a test print here soon, and then we'll go from there.
Wonderful, thank you. Miss Montana, I'm not talking about the beauty queen, I'm talking about this beauty right here. This is the actual aircraft that took the Mann Gulch jumpers in and was here for the 70th Memorial Tribute. There are plans to bring that back, so more to hear on that, but it is very touching when you're able to see it, and I was fortunate enough on the 70th, 5 years ago, to see it actually fly, take off in the airport, and do some circles around the Gulch. We'll have some educational trunk with the Montana Historical Society, so that's going to be like a legacy product that students will be able to use anywhere in the state with online resources that anywhere in the nation students will be able to look and work at. So these are just some of the exciting things that are in the works right now. Some of the amazing partners are the National Smoke Jumper Association. These folks have been in conversations for over a year. They are a group of passionate retired smoke jumpers, many who joined Ancestry.com just so they could go in and try to find all the descendants of those smoke jumpers and families. They're helping us coordinate, making sure we're inviting those families, those grandnieces and grandnephews. Again, we will have a very beautiful memorial tribute that will be happening. We had wreaths last time that will be at the Capitol. We will have on from August 3rd to August 5th a variety of events, starting with on the 3rd at the Myrna Loy, a feature of Higgins Ridge, which is an event that happened 11 years after Mann Gulch, where there were a lot of lessons learned, but also a lot of similarities of what happened at Mann Gulch. And we are so fortunate here in Helena that we actually have a smoke jumper who was involved in that. He will be on a panel discussion along with Colin Hardy, whose father was part of the rescue up at Mann Gulch, and he was head of the fire lab, and now Sarah Brown, who's the head of the fire lab. So that will kind of kick us off on Friday. Saturday and Sunday we'll have an event on the Walking Mall and a special brew from 10 Mile Brewery. So those things are in the works, and you should be seeing some artwork that'll be coming from around town. And then Monday, the actual event we will have at the Capitol, just like we did on the 50th. And there will be booths and ways for folks who are all involved in this Mann Gulch project to talk about the importance of wildland firefighting. And at 5:56, a moment of silence when we will, on that day, 75 years later, we'll memorialize the moment that watch stopped on one of those smoke jumpers' hands. We know that those men lost their lives. So it'll be a weekend full of moving tributes, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 3rd through the 5th. And if you want to know what's happening, the exact outline of events will be coming out in April. And that QR code will take you to the Montana Discovery Foundation, which is one of the wonderful partners who's helping make this happen.
John McLean.
Yes, at the Monday memorial, our featured speaker will be John McLean, son of Norman McLean, who wrote Young Men in Fire. So that's just a little preview of what's happening. Details coming out in April, but we just really want you to all know about it. Yeah.
Didn't John help put the book together?
Are you talking about Young Men in Fire?
Yes.
That was written by his father, and in all accounts that I've read, he reviewed it, and he may have been involved. I don't know if David can.
Yeah, he kind of finished it up and got it published. Yes.
Published posthumously, you're right. Great, so August 3rd through the 5th, we're excited to have that. And I just want to kind of, finish off and tell you a little bit about some of the things that are currently happening. We really have done a job of trying to incorporate all of our Mann Gulch history into our fire ecology. So a lot of the Helena school-age child care program kids are getting this message. We work with the Fire Lab with their fireworks curriculum. We're really trying to build up knowledge and an understanding and appreciation for this event happening later this year. For the paraprofessionals in the Helena School District who work with that school-age child care program in December, they had an opportunity to view Higgins Ridge ahead of time, along with one of those para-educators who helped do a workshop. And right there is Grant Graff, who is one of those smoke jumpers who will be on that panel later on in August. So lots of things happening in education and in our community. And as I finish, the things that I want to let you know is that we do have some folks here in the audience. I would love the Sierra Anderson Mann Gulch Club and their teachers, Mrs. Shannon Thomas, Mr. Dick McMahon. If you guys would stand up, I'd love to give these guys a round of applause. Dick worked on this 25 years ago with their students, 25 or more in the 90s, and took their middle school students up and really showed the appreciation for this event and how important it was. And I'm excited that my own son was able to be part of this club. If you haven't seen the news clip that was on KTVH or the Helena IR, these students started researching Mann Gulch and that Overlook Trail, which I think is one of the best ways to get to Mann Gulch because you go by some historic pictographs and you go right up to that overlook. That's my favorite way of getting there. Was just announced as being part of the National Registered Scenic Trails. And that was with the help of Sunny Mazzola with Wild Montana. So thanks to Wild Montana. One other student I'd like to recognize, he might be just streaming today. But I just wanted to mention Colt Bernard. He is part of this year-long planning that we have. Back when he was in 4-H, he started this One Foot in the Black project. You can check it out on Facebook. But his project was to actually designate that event as part of the National Fire Memorial in Maryland. And the reason I bring these two examples up, again, I'm coming from an education perspective. One of the most enduring message that you read about when you talk about the Mann Gulch event and how those family members felt about it and what they wanted to be remembered about their loved ones is the fact that they didn't want their smoke jumpers to be forgotten, that they wanted people to know who they are. And what gives me such confidence that this will continue is here we are 25 years later with the Mann Gulch Club, with the work Colt's doing, with the work these young students are doing to learn about it. So again, just much appreciation for the people who care about this and are actively trying to learn about it, about this important story to us here in Montana. So thank you. We have a treat here. We have Mr. David Casey, who will kind of finish out with one piece here that, again, talking about from the perspective of Wag Dodge, the song Cold Missouri Waters. David, I don't know if you wanted to give any more background on that from what that song might mean to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's my honor to share this song with you guys. This is a song I learned from James Keelahan. He's a Canadian songwriter. And actually there's a group called Cry, Cry, Cry. So it was about 25 years ago I learned this song and used to play it quite a bit. And when this event came up, my mom said, "You should go do this." Yes, Mom. But anyway, this is I think this is a beautiful way to kind of reflect on the evening. My name is Dodge, then you know that. It's written on the chart there at the foot end of the bed. They think I'm blind, I can't read it. I've read it every word, and every word it says is that sole confession is that the reason that you came. Get it off my chest before I check out of the game. Since you mentioned it, well, there's 13 things I'll name. 13 crosses out of old Missouri waters. August 49, North Montana. It was the hottest day on record. The forest tinder dry, lightning strikes in the mountains. I was crew chief of the jump base. I prepared those boys to fly. Hit the drop zone. C-47 comes in low. Feel the tap on the leg that tells it go. See the circle of the fire down below. 15 of us dropped the old Missouri waters. Gauge the fire, I've seen bigger. So I ordered them to side hill, each fight it from below. We'd have our backs to the river. We'd have it licked by morning, even if we took it slow. And the fire ground jumped the valley just ahead. There was no way down, headed for the ridge instead. Too big to fight it, we'd have to fight that slope instead. 13 crosses out of old Missouri waters. Gauge the fire, sky turned to red, smoke was boiling. 200 yards to safety, death was 50 yards behind. I don't know why, I just thought it. I struck a match to waist-high grass, they're running out of time. Tried to tell them, step into this fire set, we can make it, this is the only chance we get. They cursed me, ran for the rocks above instead. I lay face down and played above old Missouri waters. Then when I rose like a phoenix, in that world reduced to ashes, there were none but to survive. I spent that night, one day after, carrying bodies to the river, wondering how I stayed alive. 13 stations of the cross to mark their fall. I've had my say, I'll confess to nothing more. I'll join them now, those that left me long before. 13 crosses I love, old Missouri waters. 13 crosses I love, old Missouri shore. Shenandoah, I long to see you far away, you rolling river.
coming. That was a great presentation. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Thank you, Liz. We hope you guys will join us. We do have one more Fireside Chat planned for March. It will be at the Missouri River Brewing Company out in East Helena. We have a speaker talking about the restoration of the Sarco site out there. So keep your eyes out for more information about that. Again, thank you so much. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, there is a sign-in sheet. We'd love to have you record that. There's some stickers over there. Grab a stack for the road. Okay. Drive safe.
So who will be publishing it?
Thank you all for attending. Feel free to drop more questions below if you have them, and we'll get to them soon. Join us next time in person, Missouri River Brewing, March 14th. It'll be a good one. Thanks, guys.